Well, guys, there's a bit of drama in the ufology community, okay? And we're going to be talking about it. It's between Steven Greer and Gary Nolan. Dr. Gary Nolan, both very established people in their fields, where Steven Greer is probably like ufology field, but he's very controversial as well in his own field. And then Gary Nolan is a more beloved character. A lot of people think his ego is too big, or he thinks he's smart and precious and this and that. So, but yeah, there's been controversies and discussions around both of these people, but now they've clashed at each other's, these two titans. Okay, so we're gonna be checking out the angles, the information, the footage. So make sure you stay till the end, because the best parts are there as always. And like, comment, share. That helps the absolute most. And without further ado, get your snacks, get your popcorn, because today's gonna be an absolute banger, and you're gonna want to see this.
How far have you gotten in your investigation into those beings that you talked about and studied in your Sirius documentary? The small beings, and I think you talked about Gary Nolan worked with you on that.
Yeah, Gary Nolan received a lot of money right after we gave him that genetic sample, and he altered the results of it. So we don't know what that creature is.
He received a lot of money?
Yeah. I think it was $3.4 million from the Pentagon, and then he is now contracting with the intelligence community to show UAP injuries, which is just a psyop.
It's a psyop.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the UAP injuries are all man-made, but of course, you get someone like him.
It's the man-made. It's the man-made reverse engineered.
Of course, and of course, you put this the stink on the ETs when it's something we've done, right? So unfortunately, I think that went sideways very badly. So to this day, we don't know what that thing was. Now, he published a report saying it was a deformed fetus,
yes,
even though the top geneticist or doctor who deals with bone malformations said no way, because it was global. It had growth plates, consistent, equivalent of a 6-year-old human, but it was only about 6 inches tall. And so we don't know what it was. It could have been something that is a completely unknown species on Earth. It could have been something that's a result of both Earth and non-human interactions that are ancient in that part of the Atacama Desert in Chile.
Yeah.
There are accounts of these UFOs being seen, and these small creatures. The adult ones are like 1.5 feet tall. But to this day, we actually don't know what it is. I mean, I never said it was ET. I said we don't know what it is, but it's most certainly not human. So what was published by Gary Nolan and those guys, and I've had the top geneticists in the world tear apart their data, says it's totally hoaxed. It's totally academic fraud.
Really?
So, yes. But this happened. This is why you asked about being paranoid. I'm careful, but I'm not paranoid, because I've had so many people who could go on the path of finding the truth, and they either get blackmailed and or both bribed, given a lot of money. And next thing you know, everything goes sideways. And so, I've seen that hundreds of times in 35 years. So it makes you a little bit cynical, I guess, or skeptical. Mm-hmm. So, but no, he completely started out as an honest person. I know that, and when we first met in 2012, I think. But at this point, man, that's got to be cleaned up. It's a mess.
So Steven Greer has been sending shots at a lot of really credible, notable figures in the community, which include Lou Elizondo. Jake Barber and him give each other credibility. So it's Lou Elizondo, and there was another one, I'm pretty sure. But Lou and Steven call each other fucking charlatans, right? But while both of them profiting off of this stuff, Gary Nolan has a very secretive and high up security clearance. He's like a microbiologist of some kind. I can't remember, but yeah, really smart guy who works with a lot of complex stuff. He likes to analyze these things, and he can't talk about a lot of it. So, but he has a lot of interesting experiences as well he's spoken about, so make sure you check that out.
Great view of the eye socket. Very different eye socket. That's another thing that the scientists who've looked at this at Stanford have commented on. If you look at this creature and you look at the cranial vault, how large it is, the size from the eyes up is at least 3 times that of a human.
One of the first things that Dr. Lockman immediately remarked upon was the shape of the head and the skull. It was not something that he is accustomed to seeing, and it was quite interesting and in some ways exciting that the associated features that you would expect from a syndrome of that nature were not found. This specimen does not fall under any known, to me, class of disorders or syndromes. In many respects, the proportions of the spine and extremities are normal. The major abnormalities appear to be 1, the size of the specimen, mid-face hypoplasia and underdevelopment of the jaw, and that the specimen has only 10 ribs. Humans normally have 12, rarely 11. One of the most remarkable aspects of this is when we came down to study the actual bone density. One of the features of fetuses that specialists looks at is the so-called growth plates of the epiphyseal joint, say, of the knees. The shock, I think, and the surprise was, and the absolute certainty that Dr. Lockman had was that this specimen is between the age of 6 to 8 years old. The shock was that this specimen was clearly not fetal. How do you explain how something 6 inches tall survived to any length of time that would allow for it to survive 100 or 1,000 years ago?
So that is really strange, right? If what Steven Greer is saying about Gary Nolan is not true, think about how amazing this is coming from Gary without that in mind, right? Like, where would they live even? Underground? How would these things survive, right? Is it them controlling the fucking UFOs with the mind? Do they live in the ocean? Like, what the fuck, you know? What are your opinions? I'd love to hear them.
Steven Greer claimed that a skeleton discovered in Atacama region of Chile might be an alien. You reached out to him and took on the task of proving or disproving that with the rigor of science. The result is a paper titled Whole Genome Sequencing of Atacama Skeletons Shows Novel Mutations Linked with Dysplasia. Can you tell this full story?
The story was, as you put it right there, correct. Reached out, got a sample of the body, did the DNA sequencing, then worked with a team of 2 other Stanford scientists and Roche sequencing group, Roche Diagnostics, and probably a total team of about 11 or so people. And as is standard in these kinds of things, the professors actually don't do the work. The students do the work and figured out the answer. And then we helped them put together the story. And the story was simply that it was human, 100%. I went into it thinking it was originally a monkey of some sort. I got kind of excited a few months into the process thinking, well, what happens if it is an alien?
Yeah.
Right.
Can you describe some of the characteristics of the skeleton that make it unique and interesting?
Primarily, it had dysmorphias of the brain. And so the first thing I did, actually, when I got pictures of it, I took it to a local expert at Stanford, and he was on the paper. And he was the world expert in pediatric bone dysmorphias. He literally wrote the book. And on this, because that's what you do. You go to an expert when it's outside of your field of interest. And he said, well, I haven't seen this particular collection of mutations before, or this physiology before, but here's what I think it might be. And he said, but based on the size of the thing and the bone density, it would appear to be like 6 or 7 years old. Now, again, that's the thing where I think the lay public doesn't understand or takes a speculation like that and turns it into a fact. No one ever said that it was that age. We only said that the bones made it look like it was that age. Mm-hmm. But then we went back and looked for genetic explanations of why things might look the way they did. And if you, again, read the paper, it's very carefully caveated to say that these mutations might result in this. But what we did find was an unexpectedly large number of mutations associated with bone growth in this individual. And it was just a bad roll of the dice, right? You roll the dice enough times with enough people born every year, and someone will roll the wrong dice all at once. So the sad part about it was individuals in the UFO community who wanted to think that there was some sort of conspiracy around it, right? That somebody had somehow convinced all of my students to lie.
Right.
I mean, come on. You know, I would lose my job, first of all, and they would all be, in trouble forever. Let's go back to the Atacama case that I was debunking it. Well, debunking is a loaded term. It sort of assumes that you were going in purposefully to prove something as wrong. I wasn't. I was just going in to collect the data. And, I showed that this one was human. There was another skull that somebody had at one point. It was called the Star Child. They called it the Star Child skull. I said, I looked at it. I looked at the DNA sequencing that they had done. I said, this is human. End of story. The people who owned the thing at the time disagreed with me. And then eventually another group came in and proved that I was right. And it's not about debunking. It's about getting the more spectacular and hyped cases off the table. I mean, the reason I got interested in it is because somebody was hyping it. Mm-hmm. And not because I wanted to disprove it, but because I just wanted to know. Mm-hmm. And let's get it off the table, because it's usually the most extravagant things that are most likely to be wrong. Somewhere in the rubble will be something interesting.
So, is that it? Is that the end of the story? Was it just disproven? What about the Nazca mummies? That's a small one that we just saw, right? I don't think it's that. I hope we can get all this disproved if it is not true. And all the details are provided, so it can be proven that multiple institutions, without communicating to each other, would find the same thing. That would be a pretty significant disproval, right? So we can move on to the more important things. But now we're wondering about this because nobody makes this stuff public and it's non-transparent for some fucked up reason, right?